Hi, I'm Stephanie Grace. I'm columnist and editorial director for the Times-Picayune and the Advocate newspapers in Baton Rouge, Lafayette, and Shreveport-Bossier. And I'm joined here today by Louisiana Insurance Commissioner Tim Temple, who will be taking my questions and yours about the state of the state's troubled property insurance crisis and where it stands coming out of the legislative session. Before we get started, we'd like to thank our sponsor for the program today, AARP of Louisiana. And here's a brief message from AARP.
AARP Louisiana is honored to sponsor today's town hall with the Advocate. I'm Andrew Mull, Advocacy Director for AARP Louisiana. Like many of you across the state, I understand the challenges posed by high insurance rates. This is a significant issue that affects all of us, and addressing it is a top priority for AARP Louisiana. Today, we are privileged to have Louisiana Insurance Commissioner Tim Temple with us to discuss these high costs and the outcomes from the 2024 legislative session. AARP Louisiana stands alongside you, providing essential information and resources like today's town hall. Year after year, we remain steadfast as your wise friend and fierce defender. This commitment is at the heart of what we do at AARP Louisiana, empowering and protecting our community. To learn more and get involved, visit aarp.org/LA.
Okay, let's get into it. Thank you for joining me, Commissioner.
Good morning.
We've done this before, you and I, and we've asked our readers for questions and AARP members for questions, and it won't surprise you to know that they're a little similar to what we got last time. There's a lot of despair out there. People are really worried about whether they can afford to stay in their homes, whether they can sell their homes if they can't, because it's affecting, we had a story this weekend about how the insurance crisis is really affecting the real estate market now,
Yes.
Buyer's end and seller's end. And, a number of these questions came from people who are retired and really worried about whether they can live out their lives in their homes. So after you were elected last year, you came up with a plan focused on reducing regulations in the hope of attracting more insurers to the market, increasing competition, hopefully eventually leading to lower prices. So you've now brought that plan to the legislature. Did you get everything you wanted and everything you think you need to pursue this plan?
I think we need to start off by, addressing the concern that you're saying that viewers, citizens in Louisiana are facing. We are in, uncharted territory with the insurance crisis we're having. Traditionally, or at least in years past, there's always been something that's kind of more expensive than other, whether it was auto. For years it was auto. Commercial auto has crept into that area.
And
flood.
Those problems haven't gone away, we should add.
And they haven't, right. But flood what has been an issue for years and now is a bigger issue. But now on top of all of that is homeowners. And I understand that citizens, that individuals, that families, that businesses are all stressed. Financially stressed, and that brings a lot of fear and uncertainty. Can you stay in your home? Can you continue to operate your business? And I think that's why when you allude to the package of bills that we brought, we brought a very comprehensive, and I say we. This was not Tim Temple's plan made up by himself sitting in a kitchen. This was working with all the stakeholders to identify what the problems were, to bring solutions to address that. And so this package of bills that we brought was designed to try and tackle that, because it's not just a little bit of an issue, it's a big issue.
Right.
And we did have some success. No, I didn't get everything that we needed. And by I say we, I mean we as citizens.
Right.
We were successful with some property reform. The governor was very supportive. I think he mentioned it during his opening address to the legislature, that he was going to be very supportive of property reform. And he was. And we had great legislative leadership in the House and the Senate. And we got a lot of things that were done. And Stephanie, when I say a lot of things, these are things that the industry identified as barriers to doing business in our state.
Well, this is a question. You said stakeholders. Obviously, you come out of the industry. We know that these are reforms that the industry has long sought. Who are the stakeholders?
Sure.
The other stakeholders.
Yeah. So, we had people representing, obviously, the insurance companies themselves, the people that accept premium and that write the checks for claims. Sure. We had claims adjusters. We had plaintiff attorneys, trial attorneys. Okay. We had consumer advocate representatives. We had business owners, individuals. insurance agents. And I wanted a very comprehensive group of people so that we could truly address, on a very broad basis. Because, like I said, we could try. One option was to do things like we had in the past. Take one little bite at the apple, if you will. I don't think that we as citizens can wait to have affect just one step at a time. We need to make wholesale changes. I listen to various radio, personalities, and they say it's taken us years to get to where we are, and it has.
Right.
We can't wait years to get out of where we are. So that's why I asked the legislature and state leadership to work with me to be supportive of these broad, far-reaching reforms, and a lot of those aren't popular.
Right, and let's just run through what a few of them are.
About some of those. Sure.
The 3-year rule is being phased out. Is
phased out,
and a way of saying it? Okay, that previously insurers, if you had been with a company for 3 years and you didn't have a certain narrow set of circumstances, they could not drop you.
Correct.
And now,
and it was your third renewal. So that would be your 4th year.
Okay.
But that's a technicality, right?
Okay. And we were the only state that had that.
And we're the only state that has that in existence. And insurance companies said, listen, that makes it more expensive
now,
to do business.
Consumers loved it. It was, in many cases, it was, a safety net for them.
Well, look, I hear the same thing. Consumers love that.
Yeah.
But I hear more frequently, I can't afford the insurance renewal that I'm being faced with.
Right.
So if a company is giving you, if you're with a carrier and you've been with them multiple years and you're protected
and this
under
might
this
be
3-year rule and you're getting a renewal that you can't afford, what are we actually doing?
Okay.
And so that was part of it. Again, I think the best consumer protection is choice.
Yeah.
And when you have multiple choices, and right now I understand people don't have as much choice as they had, but that's why we're trying to address this crisis.
Right. And so one of the other things that passed is that companies can raise rates in a different way that is, more quickly. You still have to approve them, but it's after as opposed to before. Is that a way? Is that fair?
The before the law changed, it was called prior approval.
Right.
Insurance companies would submit their rates, their request, to the Department of Insurance, and if you read articles from the past and you listen to statements that were made by the prior commissioner, there was negotiations that took place.
Okay.
A carrier needs X. The department only is going to allow Y, and you negotiated somewhere in between. That's not a pro-consumer way of doing business. And insurance companies said, well, you know what? That doesn't take place in other states. So again, we're talking about attracting capital. We want insurance companies to come and do business here. And so any barrier, impediment that we put in place like that, it creates an unpredictable and unstable environment.
So is that, the 3-year rule was only Louisiana did that?
Yes.
Was this something that only Louisiana did, or some states did, some states didn't?
No, there are other states that do that. And look, I think a shining example of that is California. California has, I think it's Proposition 103.
Right.
That says that, and their rating is, they can't use predictive modeling, future forecasting modeling. They can only use prior loss results to set future rates. They also capped it at, I think, 2 or 3%. They have a consumer board panel that approves rates. And we've seen it in the last year. You've had the major insurance companies, the nationals, the big companies that write, 10, 20% of their market have said, we're not going to write any new business in California anymore. So we've got to be responsive to the industry. We want the industry here. We can't force the industry. We can't force them to come do business here. So we have to set conditions, regulations, and legislation, laws to be attractive, to attract new capital, as well as allow companies that are here currently to continue to do business.
So we've been through the session. Your package, for the most part, on property insurance was approved. Are you seeing any results yet in reinsurance, in more companies coming, in prices?
Yeah. A couple of things on that. One, I've had conversations with the insurance companies, the ones that we deal with ourselves, the names that you see on your policy. I've had conversations with companies and reinsurance companies in the London and Bermuda markets that have said that the changes that were enacted, the changes that have been signed into law by governor, are restoring confidence back into our market. That's sounds great, right?
Yeah.
But we want to see new companies.
You talked about the urgency up front.
Yes,
Where
exactly.
Are we on
so
that?
we're there. I can tell you we've had One new carrier currently has an application with the department, and it was one I had a conversation. They said, based on the reform that has taken place and become law, we are now willing to file an application to start writing property in Louisiana. Had another conversation, different carrier. They're going through that process right now internally. They have not filed an application with us, but I know it's anecdotal. But I do think it represents the intent that the industry is looking. A couple of weeks ago, I was at an insurance conference, and I was speaking with a marketing representative from one of a large national company. Said, "I want you to know, Tim, that our management in New York, they are actually," he said, "it's the first time I've ever heard them talk about Louisiana. What's going on?" He said, "They're talking about, let's see what's happening down there. Look, it's creating interest. Interest doesn't do you and I any good, and I understand that. What we want is new companies coming in and saying, I'm willing to write Stephanie's home that wasn't here last year.
And Stephanie having 3 choices as opposed to 1.
But it's going to work. That was the intent. And I just want to say that, we followed Florida's. A lot of what Florida did, they had 3 special sessions to address not just their homeowners crisis, but also they did some auto reform as well. They are now seeing that's been 2 years since they've done the reform and enacted their changes. They're seeing positive results of that. They have new capacity, new capital, new companies. They're seeing rate decreases for the first time in years.
Actual decreases, not just lack of increases.
And they're seeing flat. They're seeing companies that have been traditionally for the last several years increased, now flat, and they're seeing companies also decreasing. So the reform does work. The thing is, it takes time. And I know people want things to happen today, but that's not how it works.
So, but bottom line, there is one new company that has said it intends to come into the market?
One that has an application on file with us right now, going through that process.
Which means they want to start offering policies.
So they'll go through, and again, and another one has expressed, we've had conversations, and they are going through their internal process before it comes to us.
What about reinsurance? You've said in the past that this is kind of a key season for reinsurance.
Yeah, and look, reinsurance is,
it's complicated.
I think prior to Laura Delta Zeta Nida, there was probably a handful of people that knew what reinsurance was, right? But now everybody at least uses the word.
Yes.
And reinsurance is simply when insurance companies buy insurance. It's called reinsurance. In the reinsurance markets, there are many domestic, U.S.-based reinsurers. But there's a large majority of them that are in London and UK, London and Bermuda and some other European cities. And so, we are trying to also attract the reinsurance market. They see things from a very global perspective. So hurricanes impact, them here when they impact the U.S., but also floods in Europe. Typhoons, wildfires in Australia. I mean, it's a global market, but it also gives them a very kind of a different perspective because they get to see the entire U.S. book of business. And so if things are popping up in one state or in a couple of states, they have a nationwide view of that. And so that was some of the concerns that they had also addressed, which was our 3-year rule. Our claims practice in Louisiana, the way claims are litigated, or litigation is brought against a claim.
And there were some changes made in that too.
Correct, exactly. And so, again, we wanted to shape, it was my intent, again, to create a marketplace that companies want to come and feel comfortable putting their capital at risk, and the same for reinsurers.
AARP asked kind of a very direct, I think this is the global question here. When will you be able to evaluate the effectiveness of the department's free market approach, and what will the measurement process entail?
Well, look, I can tell you that the way we're going to evaluate it is new companies start coming back in, and again, that does take time. But we've got early indications that what we've done is going to have a positive impact, and I anticipate, again, more companies coming back. But it also, these rules, these laws that were changed, also benefit the companies that are here from the sense that they get to manage their book of business. It's not just about attracting new companies. We certainly want that, but there are companies here that may not feel comfortable writing in certain areas of our state. It is the free market approach. You allow companies to do business where they want to do business.
Are you seeing any indications that companies here are interested in
Well,
going
in
into some of these
companies that
areas?
are currently here, look,
Expanding?
yeah. Well, I have not seen that yet, but the 3-year rule doesn't. As far as with the 3-year rule, any new policy written starting August 1st is not subject to the 3-year rule, and then January 1st. That's when companies will be allowed to non-renew up to 5% of their 3-year rule.
Not everybody.
Right.
It's over time. Right.
But I think that what you'll see, and a lot of people that want to keep that policy that they think is their protection with that, if you're not part of that 5%, and that means 95% are who we're talking to, if you get a quote from another carrier and you get a quote from your current carrier that has the 3-year rule protection, you don't have to move your business, and I think what you're going to see, though, is that if companies want they're going to be more
Give you a better
competitive. So
price.
you, the consumer, get to decide where you want to go.
Okay. So it's 5% per year.
Up to 5%.
Up to 5% per year.
It's not they have to take 5.
Right.
Up to 5%.
And that's not statewide. That's per
That's
parish?
that's their statewide. They can take up to 5% of their. So if they've got 100 policies, 5 they can non-renew 5 of those.
Is there any geographical component
they
to
are
that?
limited. They can't take that whole 5% and drop it in one parish or one community.
They can't basically
one,
say we're trying to get out of, say, Orleans or another.
Correct. There has to be some geographic distribution of that. And the department we're currently going through promulgating rules to manage that process.
And is that, kind of North Louisiana versus, they're hurricane vulnerable more versus less, or is it just parish by parish?
Well, no, I mean, look, I think you've got companies that have a lot of policies in North Louisiana that probably have a lot of hail exposure that they may not like, and certainly, I mean, they're in South Louisiana, I mean, you're going to be more prone to hurricanes.
Yeah.
Of course, we just saw 2 days ago that, the hurricane that came through Houston, impacted all the way in Shreveport. I think it was, 67 tornado watches. That doesn't mean active, touchdown tornadoes, but I think it was the most they'd ever issued in one day. So hurricanes do impact all of Louisiana.
Sure. Okay. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little and go to some reader questions. A number of readers asked about the discounts available for people who put on new roofs, fortified roofs. That was another policy that was
My
passed.
predecessor had
initiated,
started that program.
And there were some additions this year.
Yes.
Reader, and I'm going to apologize right off the bat for pronunciations. I only have your written names. And Tyler Keel, again, apologies if that's not right, says has a 2-year-old roof replaced after Ida. Probably a lot of people do. Built to industry standards at that time, just 2 years ago. So a pretty new roof, but is not qualified to get the discounts associated with fortified roofs. Is there anything the state can do about that? Tyler kind of looks at that as moving the goalposts.
Well, look, immediately after Ida, there was not the fortified roof program.
Right.
I think the unfortunate timing of that is that you had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of new roofs that went up in a short period of time. Those were not fortified roofs.
Right. They should be better than old roofs.
They should, and they are better than the old roof, but because they were built to whatever the current standard was at that time. And Louisiana does have some fairly good building codes, and we need to improve those. Yeah. The fortified roof is a different roof. It's a different nailing pattern that they use. They put a waterproof barrier down between, and I'm not a roofer, but they put a waterproof barrier between, I think they call it the decking and the shingle.
Okay.
And then
like a good idea.
some additional protections to ensure that the roof stays on and the contents stay dry. So it's not this, it's better than what a new roof was put on in 2022, for example.
Even to code, a good roof in 2022.
Right, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
And so that's just an unfortunate set of circumstances. Now, it is a better roof than what was up there before. I was reading an article where I think a lady had said that she built a house in 2010, and then after Ida, she had a new roof put on. It leaked. She couldn't find the contractor and that's another thing we need to address in Louisiana is we need to do a better job of oversight on roofers that come into our state. Because they come in, they bang on these roofs, and they leave. And there's no way to track them down. And so we're working, and we're trying to work with industry to try and do a better job of that. But in this example, this lady put on a new roof, it leaked. She was able to get a grant I think, she got up to $10,000, got a new roof on, and then she said she didn't like the fact, and she was upset that the discount wasn't as much as she thought it should have been.
Which is my next question here.
Well, look, again, let's be realistic.
Yeah.
You got a $10,000 grant
Yeah.
to put on a fortified roof.
Right.
You were getting a discount. But I think that if you don't like the discount with that company, when your renewal comes up,
Yeah.
have your agent shop other carriers.
Right.
And there are other carriers. I know there aren't as many as we want right now, but there are other carriers that are willing to write. Shop those other carriers.
Right.
Maybe there's one that has a 10% or a 15 or something more than what you're getting with your current carrier.
Right.
So, I always encourage, always shop your policy. If you don't like what you have,
Yeah.
and I understand that right now there's not as many companies, but we need to encourage
there might
people
not
to
be
look.
any, I have to say. I've done this.
And there are scenarios, and I know
We've talked
there
about
are
this.
scenarios where people live where there is no option right now. But again, that's what we're working toward, is bringing that option back. So as in the future, as things improve, people will be able to get better discounts. But back to the fortified roof specific, it's a good program. I encourage people to we're getting the legislature granted us another $15 million for grants.
Is it available yet?
It's not yet. We're actually working on the application process. I think the last year they did it 3 separate times, October, November, December, and basically they just opened the portal.
Yeah.
Whoever came in, it was first come, first serve.
Okay.
We're looking at that because I want to do that differently. There are people that they're working for whatever reasons. They can't be at their desk on their computer at 12 noon or 12 midnight.
And some people are more comfortable with computer applications than others.
Exactly. And you can be quicker at it than some. And so what I want to do
older people
is
are not.
revamp that
A lot are, but
and do it differently so that we can maybe you get your name in a pot and then figure out a way how to do that. So the fortified roof is important, but I also want to mention too, wind mitigation. There's a wind mitigation survey that people can you have to pay for it. I think it's $300.
Okay.
But it's an inspector
I've
that
heard
comes
of this,
out.
yes.
And it's an important program. It's not talked about a lot.
It's a state program, or
it's not a program per se, but what it is, an inspector comes out to your home. They look at your roof. They look, do you have tie-down bolts? They look and see your elevation, and they look a whole lot of different things. And what the intent is, then they issue you a summary, if you will, that tells you what other additional credits or discounts that you might be available to you through your insurance company.
Okay.
And I hear wonderful success stories about that. The most recent one I heard, and I was at an event the other day, and it's a room of about 70 people, and a gentleman said, "Hey, I just want to tell you my personal story.
Okay.
I did my $300 survey. They came back, told me some things I wasn't aware of, gave it to my insurance company, and this is one person, right? So, but he said he now $1,700 savings per year.
Great.
So
how
and that's going to be
people,
every year going forward, right?
How do people do this? Who do they look for to do this?
Yeah, you can come to the department's website, ldi.la.gov, and there is a wind mitigation survey tab.
Okay.
You can click on that, and it gives you a list of inspectors.
Contractors. So you contact the inspector.
You contact one in your local area.
Okay.
They come out. They give you the survey. They do their survey. They give you the report, and then you can take that to your insurance company. So that's just as important, I think, as the because that's things that people already have in their homes that maybe just they aren't aware of.
And I think I've heard of a few people doing this. I think most people don't know about it, and the insurance companies might be responsive to it.
Right. And so, since I've come in January, that's one of the things internally we're like, we need to communicate that. So we're getting out. That's part of the messages. I travel the state and talk to people.
Okay. Again, apologies for pronunciation. Nathan Hegan got a fortified roof. It doesn't say whether he got a grant or not. I know some people are putting them on without the grants.
And if you put the grant on, if you put the roof on without the grant, you can also apply for up to $5,000 tax credit.
Okay.
With the Department of Revenue.
Okay, good to know. He was disappointed in his discount, 10%. Which is less than in some other states. I know there are 20% discounts in some states that are mandated by law, I think. Is that correct?
I believe you're referencing Alabama.
Yeah.
It's not a mandate, it's a benchmark. And so they start off with 20%. And
could
they can, and each
go-
company can vary from that, but they start off at a 20% benchmark.
Okay. There was a proposal to replicate that did not pass, and you did not support, as I understand it. Why not? Wouldn't that encourage people to take this important step?
Well, look, I think the example that I cited earlier with the lady, and I think it was a Times-Picayune article that referenced it. The lady said she got a 5% discount.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if we had a 20% benchmark, you had to do the 20%. That company would not have offered the 5%.
Okay.
Because they wouldn't feel comfortable, right? For whatever reason, their underwriting guidelines.
They wouldn't have offered a discount at all, is what you're saying.
If it's 20%.
If it's 20% or nothing, they would go with nothing,
Right.
what you're saying.
So that person would not have been able to get that quote.
Okay.
So that would inhibit competition. That would inhibit. So again, we're asking private industry to do business in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah.
So I think we need to encourage private industry to manage their book of business the way they see fit. Not every insurance company views every home the same. Not every insurance company has the same portfolio exposure. Not every insurance company has the same number of policies in South Louisiana as North Louisiana or East and West. And so they have to reinsure their books differently. And so their discounts are going to be different based upon their own underwriting guidelines, their own reinsurance cost, other factors like that. And so you may feel comfortable offering somebody a 20% discount. I may feel comfortable offering a 25% discount, or 10%.
Okay.
And if you set a minimum for like that, what I don't want to do is discourage companies from coming in and offering.
They might not even offer 5%.
Right.
Is
so
what you're saying.
In that scenario, if that person, what was
Nathan?
Nathan, if Nathan didn't like the 10% at his renewal, go to your agent.
Okay.
Ask them to find additional companies that offer discounts for fortified roofs, and there may be, again, the intent. We're going to create a more competitive marketplace. So as companies come in, they aggressive. If they like Nathan's property, if they like his home as a risk, they're going to offer. If they want it, they're going to offer something different, more competitive.
And again, I think when we're talking about roofs, it's important to note it's not just whether you need to replace your roof, but it's whether your contents are exposed, whether water gets in and does much further damage.
That's correct. Yes.
So
it's not
really
just insuring the roof.
Right. So
correct.
this is like a really important thing, the roof.
It is. I mean, look, again, if your shingles stay on and your contents stay dry, you get back in your home sooner.
Yeah.
The community recovers quicker.
Yep.
I mean, it's good for everybody. It's good for you as a consumer. You have less loss. The insurance companies have less loss.
Right.
And at the end of the day, the less loss they have, the more competitive they can be on a go-forward basis, which means lower premiums.
And it's also less disruptive to people's lives.
It's less destructive to everybody, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're after. We want to. And look, let's talk about. We need to continue to mitigate.
Yeah.
We're a coastal state. We have a lot of, because of our population that lives in proximity to the coast. Then that means most of our risk are in proximity to the coast. Our homes. So we need to continue to mitigate where it makes sense and where we can. We can't build everybody's house out of concrete and do what they do in Bermuda. That's just that's unrealistic. But we do need to continue because going back to Alabama, they started their fortified program over a decade ago.
Right.
They now have, I think, 45,000 fortified roofs in their state. They only have 2 counties that are exposed to the coast.
Proportionally less coastal exposure.
But they have 45,000 fortified roofs. Of that number, about 6,500 were through their grant program.
Okay.
The vast majority of those people chose to put them on, pay for them themselves, or they built a new house and the building codes required that.
Okay.
And it works. They had, I believe the number I always like to reference is Hurricane Sally that hit Alabama a couple of years ago. They had somewhere around 17,000 homes that had fortified roofs were exposed to that hurricane. I think it's less than 3% lost shingles.
Okay.
So they work. And I would encourage everybody, if you figure out a way to put a fortified, the state has allocated money. The legislature has been very gracious. It's now going to, that total $45 million for fortified roofs. We're going to continue to ask for funding for that, but I'm also looking at finding a different funding source so that it doesn't come from the taxpayers.
Right. You talked about industry.
Yes.
Asking industry to do
which is
that.
what they do in Alabama.
Okay. And so, taxpayers don't fund it at all in
No,
Alabama.
theirs is funded through the industry.
Okay. So, a number of questions were also got at kind of are there different ways you can give consumers a break during this very difficult period? And Julie Lasky is one person who also got a fortified roof, but said that homeowners must first pay for an inspection, and asked, would you support making the requirements more clear or having the grant program cover the cost of the inspection in order to help out cash-strapped homeowners?
Right. I think that I would like to see the money, as much money, go toward the roof as possible, just because that's a better spend.
Okay.
The fact is, you may have people that you get a grant, but you don't know that you have the roof, so the grant's going to pay for part of the inspection. What happens if you don't meet? If your roof isn't able to get a fortified, if your property isn't able to get a fortified roof, so then that money would have to be, the grant is a reimbursement. It's to the. I'm sorry, the grant is paid directly to the roofer.
Okay.
The grantee doesn't. The recipient does not get that and then pay. So that would create a whole new set of mechanisms. I think what I'd like to see is, and it sounds like if we're talking about people that are low to middle income, financially stressed, we're actually trying to work with NGOs.
Okay.
To create a bridge, if you will.
Oh, okay.
If they can help find the money to get someone to pay for the inspection, then we'll follow up with, and they become available for a grant and do that. I think that's a tough one to deal with. And I understand, again, we're stressed everywhere financially right now. I mean, with inflation, cost of gas, groceries, there's nothing that's going down. And this is just another added expense. But this is actually an expense where you get a benefit back at the end of the day through a reduced a savings in your insurance premium. So I know that's a tough one, but we've had conversations with NGOs to see if there's a way that they have funding to help people get that, pay for that inspection.
Because sometimes just the little upfront cost is enough of a deterrent. Yeah.
Right. And again, I want people to be able to get that if they can, but I don't think that spending the grant money that way is the best use of those funds, nor is it what the legislature intended.
Okay. I should ask, if people want to get onto the list for a grant, how do they do it?
Well, that's a good question, because we haven't opened up the grant process again, and at the right time when we do. Like I said, we're currently reviewing and revising the rules on who becomes who can become an applicant, not who can become an applicant, but who would get a grant.
Right.
Again, we're looking at do we want to focus in geographic areas? Right. Do we want to make it more applicable to lower income? Okay. We're looking at all of that.
And the legislature didn't determine that that's up to...
No, that's up to the department.
Okay.
They gave us the authority to do that. Because we also want to make sure that the state gets the most benefit from that. It's like if you concentrate a lot of, and again, we're looking at Alabama, and I'm talking to reinsurers right now. If you concentrate a number of roofs in an area, do all of those people, and again, yesterday I spoke to a gentleman, he said on his street after Ida, he was one of 6 homes on his block. His was the only fortified roof.
Okay.
So I'm talking to reinsurers and insurance companies to see if we get a concentration, if 5 of those 6 or 4 of those 6 or 3 of those 6 had fortified roofs, does everybody kind of get a shared benefit from an insurance or reinsurance cost on that? And so we're having conversations on that. And as we go forward with the new grant program, again, does it make sense to target a specific community? And that's not something I came up with. That was actually conversations with Alabama.
Okay.
When they started their program, again, over a decade ago, they took, I think, 2 years to design it, having conversations with insurance companies. And they found that by targeting and having concentration of fortified roofs, there was actually a bigger community benefit.
Okay.
And so we're looking into that and seeing if that's something that we can do. Because if someone applies for a grant and gets one in Alexandria and one in Shreveport and 2 in Lake Charles and 3, and does that really help? I mean, it helps those individuals.
Right.
And we certainly want that. But if there's a way to concentrate, but more of the state gets a benefit from a reinsurance cost, that's something we're looking at.
Because those are kind of community ratings more than individual ratings. Okay.
So again, we're looking at that. I don't have an answer for it, but I want your viewers to understand we're looking at everything.
Sure.
I don't want to just continue to do something the way it was done in the past just because.
Am I correct that Citizens customers get preference on those?
On grants?
Grants.
No.
No, I'm not correct.
They do not.
Is that one of the considerations possibly?
That is something that we're looking at too.
Okay.
Is seeing is that can you
apologize for that.
or maybe can we allocate a portion of those funds for citizens? We're looking at everything, and that is one we're having conversations about.
Okay, got it. And so if people want to kind of keep their eye on this and apply at the right time, they should just kind of
Look, we will have a
and
very active communications.
Okay. But there's nothing they can do now to get on kind of a preliminary.
No, there's not a
list.
preliminary.
Just keep your eye on it.
And again, like I said, in my mind, what we're looking at is everybody kind of gets their name in the same bucket.
Okay.
And then we figure out a way,
Yeah.
automatic way that a name's
Is there
drawn.
a time frame for that?
You're going to make me try and
Well,
put
just
a
so
pen
people
down.
can,
But
I think people want to get on the
sometime,
list.
I'd
so
say
what
probably
should-
the last quarter of this year
Okay.
is one because the legislature still has to allocate the funds.
Okay.
There's a process that goes through that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got a number of questions on, again, in the vein of, is there any relief of, more relief possible in the short term? Asking about tax policies. Is it possible, Elliot Shushan of Metairie wants to know if you could consider waiving state taxes on policies, again, during this period. Theodore Hine of Gretna and Dexter Joseph of New Orleans asked about making insurance tax deductible, the state or the federal level and the federal level, because the cost of damages are deductible. If
Right.
you've had damage, that's deductible. Can premiums be deductible? Is that an idea that anyone is considering, could be considered?
That's one that we would look at and go to the legislature because I
Right.
can't waive taxes.
Right. There's fiscal session next
Right.
year. They're going to be talking about taxes.
And there certainly is. And that's one that, I can tell you, when I came into the office, one of the things that I was maybe aware in the back of my mind, but hadn't really thought about too much is Louisiana has the second highest premium tax in the country.
Right.
And that is money
Elliot
that...
his is $500, he
Yeah.
said.
And that's money that doesn't go to the insurance company. It
Right.
goes to the state of Louisiana.
Right.
So, again, if we cut taxes, that's less revenue for the state.
Sure.
So you also have to cut expenses somewhere. But that's
Right.
one. I'm not
Right.
pushing that off, saying that
Right.
that's not. That's one I would love to have the conversation with the legislature, with the Department of Revenue, with state leadership, and say, is this something? Because that would bring a little bit of relief to the consumer.
Right.
We've got to balance that.
Right.
The other thing too, you mentioned so there's the premium tax, but then also
Tax
some type of tax deductibility or
Yes.
credit, something like that. That's one I would be willing to have a conversation with the legislature to see if there's a way we can help facilitate that
Okay.
conversation. Because again, I don't have the power to grant
Yeah.
that. The legislature does.
Do you know if there could? Obviously, there's a big tax conversation coming next year. We've
Yes.
already heard the beginnings of it from Richard Nelson, the Revenue Secretary. Is this something that has come up at all? Do you know?
We've had just over coffee conversations,
Yeah.
I would say, about it. Nothing formal. But I do think it's something that we should look at.
Okay.
I can look at other states to see what they've done in the past.
Yeah.
I don't remember after Katrina and Rita if the state did anything similar or not. There may be some precedent there, but certainly worthy of a conversation to have because that is something that brings immediate relief to the consumer.
Right. Okay. Here's a question from Kathy Hightower, another reader. She asked if you would join with other insurance commissioners to lobby for federally subsidized all hazards insurance, in the theory that climate change is affecting everybody.
Well, look, I can tell you that I'm not real excited about the way the current federal program for flood is working.
Okay.
I'm not encouraged by that.
Something else that has not been solved while we've been focusing on this.
Right. So I don't know. And there's been a lot of people trying to focus on flood,
absolutely. Yes.
and with little success on that. So I'm not sure that the federal government is the way to turn to. That may be, again, going off the previous issue with the tax, maybe that's something that the federal level, they would be willing to give a tax, credit to, for that, for purchasing,
Right.
property insurance or something like that. I don't think that, I'm more of a less government is better type person. And I don't think that looking to the federal solution is what we want. Again, this is a free market product.
Right.
I
guess the idea with flood insurance is the private market wouldn't do it, wouldn't provide it. So really, kind of as a last gasp, the federal government did. I mean, is that where we are with some of these major hazards?
Yeah, I mean, there was private flood, and there still is private flood, and and companies do like to write flood. But again, they write in areas that
where it doesn't flood.
Well, no, that's not true, because there are companies that write actively in Louisiana right now, and in areas that flood.
Okay.
But they offer different limits. They have different underwriting guidelines, and the federal flood is kind of like you got to take somebody, right?
Right.
You don't have a choice.
Right.
And people typically that want it are the ones that know that they're going to flood.
And the federal flood insurance is not actuarially based. It's moving in that direction, and that's the crisis, really.
Well, it's moving in that direction, and I think that's the issue right now is how are they moving? What's their formula? And I know there's litigation.
But also, is it affordable once it is actuarially based? That's a hard word to say.
And I think that's something, too, that we hadn't touched on is the affordability. Is it affordable? NFIP for years sold flood, whether it made actuarially whether it was actuarially sound or not to them. They're trying to go toward actuarially sound, and I think that's where the conflict arises. Insurance companies, again, actuarially sound, but also they're in the business of selling a product.
Right.
If you can't afford their product, then they aren't in business. Right. And so I think that's one thing.
Of making a profit. So
because you pay claims out of the money you make, right? So you have to make money. Otherwise, you go insolvent, like we had 12 companies in Louisiana do.
This is another question from a reader named Bruce Evans, and he's urging you to inform people that some of them can bifurcate property and casualty coverage, basically. Hurricane wind, hail, get that through Citizens if it's not available elsewhere, but get another policy for other perils, fire. I'll tell you, I was able to do this and save some money. Yeah. How widely available is this option?
And that is one, and and I'll take that on as that's something we probably need to add to our communication. And I just. I mean,
you have to ask for
typically,
it. You have to ask your agent to look at it.
Well, and look, agents know, and they're sophisticated, and they can certainly, and you should have that conversation with your agent and say, can I buy my wind coverage through Citizens, and buy, in that example, my fire and liability, coverage through a standard carrier? That's certainly an option. And again, I would, and we'll add that to the message, is that you need to have that conversation with your agent and see what options you have out there.
Do you know if this is an option that's available to most people, or only in some places?
No, I think it's widely available. Okay, and that's what we've got to look at and see. We've got that's a conversation we can have with Louisiana Citizens too, because that's something that they could promote, and would
get some of the business off their books, which is what they want and what you want.
They would actually be getting more business. They would be getting the wind,
right? But they wouldn't have the other,
and
liability.
They wouldn't have the fire. Right, correct. So again,
it might be a better option for some people.
And again, I would always say, and you're going to hear me say this a lot. Your agent can be your best friend on when it comes to what options you have for insurance. They know what the marketplace is. They're the expert. They know who's writing where and who's not. They know where you can go or where you can't, and they are your best, your best ally when it comes to trying to mitigate this environment, this current crisis we're in with regards to affordability.
Back to Citizens, it seems that Citizens customers are able to get something like a 2% deductible on storm coverage. A lot of private policies are at 5%. This actually makes Citizens very appealing to people in some cases, when the idea is you want to get people off Citizens and into private coverage. Why is this? Is this something you're looking at?
Well, it's I became I guess I'm on the board of Citizens now, starting officially in this past January. We've had one board meeting. We've actually got another one coming up soon. And look, that is one thing that I have asked questions about.
Right.
I've always said that Citizens is supposed to be a safety net, not a hammock.
Right.
That's what I like to say, because that's true. And I think that there are a lot of people that feel comfortable being in Citizens, the 2%. Citizens should not be a better product than what the standard market can offer.
And again, objectively, I know that there is the 10% surcharge that is temporarily waived. I know, but in that case, it is a very substantially better product.
It is, and that's the question: does it promote and encourage more people to want to go into Citizens?
Right.
Is it a safe harbor right now? Yes, I think it is, but it's a necessary safe harbor. As we improve the market and as companies come back to Louisiana and we see more competition, that's one I think we need to take a serious look at and see how do we revamp Citizens so that it goes back to being just that safety net.
Right. I mean, to that effect, there was this. The law requires the premium to be 10% higher than what is available in that area in the market. That's now been waived for 3 years.
Starting January 1st of 2025 as your renewal comes up.
Right.
It doesn't apply to all policies and Citizens effective January 1st. It was as your renewal comes up.
Okay. You initially opposed that, and then you kind of recalculated, I should say. Why is that?
Yeah, well, look, because it was just a blanket, just do away with the 10%. I mean, Citizens, again, the intent is you can't obtain coverage anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's not that there's nobody else writing. It's just, the current crisis, when it was created, it was that you can't obtain coverage anywhere else, whether it's because you live literally on the coast, or perhaps you live 15 miles in the middle of a piney forest away from a fire station. For whatever reason, insurance companies don't want to write there. So that's the intent of Citizens. So you needed to have that higher surcharge to cover risk that insurance companies don't want. Right now, we had over 100,000 policies come into Citizens, not because they were undesirable, but because insurance companies went insolvent.
Right.
And the insurance companies left the state, stopped writing. Right. So there's a lot of good.
And the customers didn't have other private sector options.
Well, right. But again, because everybody just said we're going to stop writing right now. And so there's a lot of what I would call good risk. In Citizens. But I was opposed to that 10%, reducing that to 10% just by itself, because that's one of the things where you've still got the exposure, but you're reducing the revenue that you need to pay when you do have a claim. And so the bill that I got behind by Senator Talbot reduced the 10%, but it also capped litigation expense. So what you can claim on your policy.
On your Citizens policy.
On your Citizens policy.
Oh, okay.
You can still and people are like, wait a second, I can't claim. You still still get your policy limit.
Okay.
So if you had a $100,000 home insured, you're still going to be able to claim up to $100,000 if you had $100,000 worth of loss. So this was dealing with bad faith.
Okay.
If you got an attorney and they claimed bad faith and you got a judgment, there was a penalty, so you could collect more than your policy limit.
Okay.
This just goes back to me. It's really simple. It's dollar in, dollar out. I mean, if you had a $100,000 home and that's the policy limit you bought, that's the most that you should be able to collect. It doesn't change. No, correct.
Okay, it changes litigation, which has been a focus of yours, and Senator Talbot's.
Right. So it lowered the exposure, the financial exposure of Citizens. While reducing revenue associated. So I was okay with that bill. And again, your viewers have to. I would like them to remember is that Citizens is not a state-backed entity. And it's a phrase that's used incorrectly quite often, often by the media. It is not a state-backed entity. It is backed by we, the policyholders.
And that's that extra little charge on your private bill to go towards Citizens.
But that little extra charge was because Citizens went insolvent, or I say insolvent. They had more expenses than they did revenue, money, and so they had to bond $1 billion back in 2006. And we've been paying that $1 billion off over the last 20 years. And so actually we retire that bond next year. So if Citizens pays out more money than it has, we as the policyholders fund that for the future, not the state of Louisiana. So we want to make sure that Citizens is solvent, but we don't want to create an area where people are getting more than what their policy limit says, more than what Citizens collected from a premium standpoint. So I was good with that bill because it balanced.
Okay. And again, it's 3 years.
It's 3 years, correct.
What happens if it's a bad hurricane year, or like everybody says it could be, if Louisiana gets another bad hurricane? What happens to all of this?
Well, I mean, the reforms are still in place.
Yeah.
I think what it does is it delays the impact of those. Look, again, it's about creating an attractive marketplace. That doesn't change. Those are going to be in place. What it will impact is the reinsurance. How much. Again, Laura, Delta, Zeta, and Ida. Those were 4 hurricanes, 2 of the strongest recorded in Louisiana history. 800,000, claims filed as a result of those 4 hurricanes. 20 billion plus paid in premiums, or paid in losses. Let's don't have that again.
Yeah.
But if we have another hurricane season, it doesn't even have to impact Louisiana.
Okay.
Or hit Louisiana to impact the reinsurance market.
So
It
for
could be Florida.
reinsurance, we're not looking at Louisiana specific. We're looking at
how does it impact the coastal U.S., right? Okay. Whether it's Florida or North Carolina or Texas. Right. And so, but again, all these legislative changes that we enacted and worked towards, those are things that we can control. And I say it all the time. That was my focus. I want to work on things that we can control. Okay. We can't do anything about the weather except pray, and I do that every day, that we have a mild hurricane season, even though I know it's forecast.
You're not alone there.
Yeah,
Yes.
and we all need to do that. But we can, we can improve the regulation, we can improve the legal environment, and we can also improve the actual risk, like we were talking about with the fortified roof. And so, that's one of those things where I don't think that our changes, it just delays the impact of those in the future. Look, Florida, like I said, Florida did their changes over 2 years ago. We hadn't had any hurricanes, during that 2-year period, and they're seeing the positive results of that. So I think that's what we can anticipate, provided we don't
Provided we have some luck, yes. Yeah. Okay. You mentioned 2 years. You've been through 1 legislative session. Do you have an agenda yet?
I've been through 3.
Well, one
Two specials,
regular.
right.
You're right. It's been a constant. But do you have an agenda yet for the next legislative session, next regular session, I should say, because we don't know otherwise, which will be a tax session, a fiscal session? Yeah.
We're working towards that. We've got some ideas. Again, we're talking to, stakeholders, just like right now, you and I talking about tax.
Yep.
Those conversations take place just organically all the time. I wouldn't say that I've got 6 bills in my mind. I do have a couple that I'd like to see, and the department will engage with various legislators to bring for next session. But we're kind of still in that. Let's collect a lot of good ideas. Look, if we had a special session, if it was called tomorrow, we would have some bills that we could bring to continue to work on reform. But just like we did in the current regular session that we just went through, it's going to be very thought out, mindful. With I kept during session I kept having a lot of people say use the word hope. And I kept correcting him. I said, this is not hope. This is a plan.
Okay.
This is a strategy designed. I don't think that hope is a good way to go.
It can't hurt, but it's not a plan.
Whatever, I can assure you and your viewers, whatever bills that we bring, it is going to be based upon well-intended, thought-out plan to impact positive reform for us as citizens.
Okay. My last question is, you were new to politics when you took this office. You didn't even have to run a campaign, really, because your opponent dropped out. So there you were in the, political world. It's been very active. Is it what you imagined? Is it different? Is it more challenging? What are your thoughts 6 months or so in?
All of those that you just said.
Okay.
Look, I can tell you it is a tremendous honor to be able to sit in a position to have a positive impact on people's lives. And I know right now that everybody's stressed financially, and they want to blame me because I'm in the seat. That's fine. That's what happens when you run for an office and you get it. But I wake up every day with, how do we make this state better for citizens? How do you make it so that people keep more money in their pocket versus giving it to insurance companies? Because I believe that you and I as consumers should be the we're the best decision makers on where we need to spend our money. And when you're spending more on insurance, and by the way, Louisiana is the most unaffordable state in America for insurance, which means that we spend a larger percentage of our paycheck toward insurance costs than any other state. People in California, people in New York, they spend less of their money, less of their paycheck on insurance than we do in Louisiana.
States.
and all the other coastal states. So my intent is to let
Change
you
that.
keep as much of that in your
Okay.
pocket and spend it where you think and where you know you
Right.
need to spend it. So I wake up every morning just refreshed about the opportunity to make that impact. And I know it's not taking, the change doesn't take place quickly.
Right.
It doesn't take place overnight. It does take time. But we're working on that every single day. And I'm like I said, I feel very blessed and honored to be in this position to try and work on impacting people's lives positively.
Well, thank you so much. Obviously, everybody wishes you well on that, I think.
Right.
Again, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk to you. It has been really interesting and informative. We'd like to once again thank our sponsor, AARP of Louisiana, for their support to bring this important information to our viewers and to their members. And thank you again for sharing your time and your insight. And I suspect we'll do this again sometime
Yeah,
soon.
look forward to it. And look, and I would just, I would like to remind your viewers that if they ever have any problems, if they don't think that they're being treated fairly, either by their insurance company, by a claims adjuster, by an agent, anybody that's touching an insurance dollar, that, you can come to the department. You can call us at 1-800-259-5300, or you can go to the website at ldi.la.gov.
Commissioner Tim Temple, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay.